The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband is Steve Siegel, and he's the producer of the podcast. Today's episode is episode number 271. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a good review so that Google will find us when people search. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up on our videos, and ring the bell so that you're always notified when we have a new video. Today we have an interview with a gentleman named Jay Lind. After traveling the world, he came home to become an English teacher. He married a wonderful woman and they started a family. But when his father was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, his occasional drug use exploded into full-blown cocaine addiction, culminating in terrible choices that threatened everyone he loved. As an addict in recovery, Jay found the strength to bounce back from his collision with rock bottom. He continues to make progress today, and he is an author. Let's talk to Jay Lind. Jay Lind, thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast today and sharing your story.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So take us back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? How did you, what was your life like when you were a kid? And how did you get introduced to drugs?
Sure. Well, for me, in some ways, this is the part that separates me from other addicts and alcoholics. And it's an important part, I think, of my story to share, is that there isn't some childhood trauma. There isn't, I don't have this long list of resentments in my life. I lived a very privileged life. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, two loving parents, brother and sister, great family. I was good at school. I loved sports. I had lots of friends, everything. It's like I couldn't have been luckier. I won the lottery by where I was born and who I was born to, no doubt. And, leading into high school, I had thought, I was part of this group, like we were popular kids. We were like, but we're going to go to high school and we're not going to drink. Everyone told us that's what happens when you get to high school. But my best friend and I remember like making a pact, like we're not going to drink. We're going to be the cool kids who don't drink. And about 2 weeks into high school, I got drunk before a dance. It didn't last, like pretty much my first opportunity. I blew it and I loved it. I had so much fun. There weren't any negative consequences. And I remember thinking like, oh man, that just made like hanging out with friends even more fun. And I remember my friend who I drank with, the same friend who I made the pact not to drink with, he got sick and he was like, I'm never doing it again. Of course he did, but not as much as I did, or he didn't love it the way I did. So through high school, though, I drank, I was surrounded myself with other people who like to drink and party and, have fun. We were definitely, I would say, binge drinkers, weekend drinkers. When we drank a lot, but it didn't get in the way of, big things in our life and school and family and sports and all that. I did well in school. I ended up getting into a good college. Went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is a known party school, often like right at the top of the list. I'm sure that had something to do with why I chose to go there.
Okay, Jay, I'm just going to interrupt for a second because you just
Sure.
made me think of something. Can you actually Google which are the best party colleges? You probably
there's
can,
lists.
can't
They
you?
make a list. They make a list every year, and we're very proud of it up there in Madison to be on the top of that list.
Okay.
So I went there in part because of that, I'm sure, but also what a great school and a great city in Madison. Anyway, so I drank there, partier, binge drinker, over drinker, but I still went to school, did my work. I did okay. Eventually, kind of found my calling there, which was to be an English teacher, I decided. And at that point, school was great, but I would work hard, play hard. But definitely harder than the other people I'm seeing now. And I didn't do any other drugs, nothing. I didn't smoke weed. I didn't do any other drugs. I never came in contact really with other drugs besides, I knew, a lot of people who smoked marijuana, but it wasn't my thing. I was like a partier. Marijuana makes you want to sleep, or makes me want to sleep and eat a pizza and watch a movie. And that's not much fun for everybody else. But on my last day of college, after I finished, before I was packing up and moving out, a situation came up where I actually saw cocaine for the first time. Like, came across it at a party, and I'd never even seen it. And I tried it, and I loved it. I couldn't stop talking about it for months and months. But I moved out of town the next morning.
What year was that, Jay? Just
That
curious.
is 1996.
1996. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the, I wanted to add in just kind of an editorial comment. Even though you say, you didn't have childhood trauma, I get that, but I think that makes your story even more important, because there are so many young people out there who begins experimenting with drugs who really don't have childhood trauma. And I think it's very, very hard for parents who go, why did my son do this? What was wrong that my son did that? And you just did it because, hey, you thought it'd be fun, and I think that happens a lot. And I want people listening to maybe, keep that aspect in mind, so parents aren't going, oh, it's my fault, I did something wrong, I was too mean, or, not necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. I think that, this is my theory and other people's theory, and I'm not the only one to think of this, but that I have addiction in there. It's like bubbling under the surface. I was born with some kind of thing. And most people who did what I did weren't going to turn into me and go off the rails at some point, because they don't have that, whatever it is, whether it's a genetic link or who knows what. But obviously addiction is in families. We know that. And it's around in mine too. It was in there, and something had to set it off. So it was like I was born with a loaded gun, but it wasn't going to shoot if nothing set it off. So up to that point where I am in my story, nothing had set it off. And, I knew when I tried cocaine that time how much I loved it, and I kept talking about it. But then I moved to Chicago, and then traveled around the world for a year with some friends, and drank, but stayed out of trouble, made it home. And then went to grad school and became a teacher. The whole time.
So, wait a minute. So that whole time you traveled all around the world, you never did cocaine?
No, never.
Wow. Okay.
Never. Again, we didn't really see it. It wasn't like often. I'm sure if it was in front of me, I would have done it.
I got it.
And I was too scared to look for it. I thought, if you do cocaine, you have to deal with some like cartel, and you're gonna, I didn't know anything about anything. And then came back and went to grad school and became a teacher in Chicago. And same thing, I would occasionally overdo it, right? So I was getting a little more mature and drinking less, or having those bad, I used to say I overdid it. I would have less of those overdid it nights. And I met another teacher, and we got married, and like teachers often marry other teachers. And we had two sons. Everything's going great. I end up teaching back at my old high school, like nationally renowned high school. It's great. She gets a job there too. And then we moved to my old town and we have these two sons. Everything's going great. Everything's under control.
You're like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's like, that's why I think the story is important, because that I still was in danger, and there weren't really a bunch of other signs. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hiding from my feelings. I wasn't pretending to be happy, but I wasn't happy. I was really happy. I loved my job more than anything else in the world. And my kids were doing great. And everything, like, I couldn't have planned it out better. And then my dad got sick. And this is about 2013 or so. My dad got sick, and he just had like an incident, went to the hospital. Turns out he has a brain tumor. And the doctors say pretty clearly, like, he's going to die in about a year. He's going to have surgery, radiation, and then he's going to like slowly, die, but a year would be great. And I had never experienced any bump in the road until that point, no adversity in my life. And my dad really was my hero. I end up much like him, being a flawed but really genuine person. And my dad had a lot of the similar issues that I have, I think, and right at about 40 years old, which is how old I was when he got sick, he kind of figured it out and started getting better. My mom was very happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
so he was a drinker?
He was a drinker.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if he was an alcoholic. I doubt it. Anyway, in some level of this on the spectrum, I'm sure.
Okay.
But he was, he had issues with boundaries and risk related behavior, sort of impulsive person, and maybe wasn't thinking about consequences and other people or his family as much as he should. But at about 40, he started owning it and getting better. And by the time he died, he was like the best person I've ever met. And my mom and my dad were like, in love and happy and living this great life because some switch flipped. So anyway, when my dad, and so I loved him and recognized that very much. And when he got sick and died, I was unprepared for it to deal with that because of how smooth my life had been.
Well, how long did he live after he was diagnosed, Jay?
1 year, almost exactly a year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in a tough year of dealing with the surgery and the radiation, and then, the last few weeks dealing with him dying, it's rough.
It is.
And there's a saying about smooth seas not making strong sailors. My life had been very smooth and I wasn't very good at sailing. And so when I hit the choppy water there, I flew off the rails. There's a mixed metaphor there, but I flew off the rails. So about that time, like I had occasionally up to then come around coke and done a little cocaine, but only a little bit here and there. And then I sought it out as an escape, and it temporarily worked. And then very quickly, snowballed out of control. And I was in full-blown addiction as my dad was dying. I was teaching high school English and managing to keep my head above water in my marriage and with raising my kids and hiding it from everyone.
So your wife didn't know?
She had no idea. She had no idea.
You were good, Jay.
Yeah, well, as you've been doing this podcast for a long time. I'm sure I'm not the first addict to tell you we're good at our jobs there. The only way to keep it going is to fool people. And I had to fool everybody, the people closest to me. And I managed to still go to work and do my job. But underneath there, I was so miserable. Where I was doing cocaine before work, at work, after work, at home when my family was asleep.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. What about money? Doesn't that do quite a drain on your finances, and your wife didn't notice?
Yes. Robin Williams said that cocaine is God's way of telling you have too much money. So I had to hide where I was getting money, what I was using money for. I was taking all these payday loans and borrowing money and owing money to a drug dealer. And so there's a lot of covering my tracks too. So I was in way over my head. After my dad died, it just went, completely crazy, and I was barely holding on. Eventually, and this sort of gets to my point of no return, I guess. I got myself in some legal issues and financial issues that often this is where it goes, and trouble at work. And
can you say what legal issue?
Yeah, I guess I'd rather not go into all the details of it.
It's okay.
It ended up with a felony conviction and probation.
Okay.
So I didn't have to go to jail or I didn't have to go to prison or anything like that.
Okay.
But that was the point of no return, obviously, where the secret's out. So now I had to tell. I had to tell everybody what's going on.
Yeah, because out of the blue, you just don't get arrested for something weird.
No.
There's, yeah, okay.
And so it needed to, I had to sit down. So basically, in the back of my mind, or not too far in the back of my mind, but in my mind, I knew that I was an addict, 100%. I knew I had to go to rehab. I knew which rehab I wanted to go to. Some of the people in my family had been there. I know all about it. I know how great it is. I was just waiting for it to a situation that forced me there, because I couldn't, just pull the trigger and ask for help, which would have seemed so easy, but definitely is not easy.
Hardest thing is to ask for help, I think.
Yep. So that day, one day I just opened the floodgates and let it all out to my wife and my mom and my brother, and they helped me get out of there and get to rehab.
Did you ever do anything besides cocaine, or was it just cocaine?
No, cocaine and drinking. Okay. Yeah, that's it. I had no real interest in any other drugs. And I went to inpatient rehab, and then that's over 6 years ago. And so from that point, it's 6 years I've been in recovery now, with some bumps in the road. I like to consider it all in recovery. I think it's counterproductive to say when there's a slip or a relapse that, now you're starting over, because it's all part of that same process. I stayed in recovery during those slips. The last one was quite a while ago now, but I consider my recovery beginning that, when I went to rehab in Minnesota. And since then, there's, at the beginning especially, it was very, very hard, early recovery, because when I got back from rehab, all of my problems were still there. And now I'm losing my job, and
you don't have the cocaine to help you cope with it.
I don't have the cocaine. I could get
the
it,
alcohol, yeah.
So now you're forced to face life on life's terms. And my life was pretty crappy.
I'm sorry for interrupting again. So how long have you been clean and sober now?
Yeah, so like I said, 6+ years of recovery. It's been, I'll say years since any use. There was a couple of bumps in the road early on.
Well, I just have to say very well done. And I say that to a lot of people that come on the podcast, because I'm not a former addict, so I know I have not been there and personally experienced it, but I know from all of the people that we've talked to, it is not easy. No. And you just very well done for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, so you lost your job.
Yep, and then eventually my marriage. We did counseling and worked on it for a long time, but eventually decided that we should part ways, but we today still get along great. She's an amazing person and a great friend, and we do a great job co-parenting our kids. We're partners with that, which obviously wouldn't be possible if I was still using or had an active addiction. There's no way I could have managed that, and I probably would have lost the custody of my kids on top of that. Yeah. So I'm so grateful to her for that. But I had I was then faced with, okay, you lost that and that. These are more excuses to use. And I feel tons of shame and guilt over all of it, which is always my biggest issue. So I had to figure out how to deal with that and not, go in another downward spiral like I did before. And I owe that to the couple stints in rehab or, inpatient. And then when I came back, outpatient rehab as well. And then meetings. And building those connections in the community and in recovery, people, a support system to help hold you accountable.
So it's the support system that really helps you stay clean and sober. And that makes sense, because you have to have something you can fall back on, or somebody you can fall back on, that will steer you in the right direction. And obviously, it's not necessarily the people that you were friends with before who were helping you get the cocaine, but I got it. So you have like a support network that you can.
Yeah, and I think I always had a great support network, because, like I said earlier, I had a different life. My using life was like a second life. And I have a group of unbelievable friends who knew nothing and family who knew nothing. And the best therapist in the entire world who's helped me through all of this. And I just wasn't being honest with them and using them appropriately. And also, they're not addicts and alcoholics, and it's hard for them to really help me anyway. So in my situation, once I got sober, I needed to find a community in the recovery area so that I knew, I could have other people who,
understand. They've been there, done that.
Yeah, and it's not anyone's fault for not getting it, because usually we don't get it unless we have to.
Yep. So you wrote a book.
Yes.
When did you write it? Tell us about the book. What led you to that?
I started writing it about 5 years ago. So about a year into my recovery, I was in a meeting in one of my outpatient recovery stints. And the idea kind of came to me because I've been writing. I was an English teacher and a writer, but I'd never written a book before. But I was using writing as part of my recovery, a lot of journal writing. And it was very helpful to me. And then I started realizing some of what I was writing in my journals was pretty nice. I liked it. Like I was writing about the stories I was hearing, and what I was learning from them. So the idea just came to me, like, what if I wrote a book, like a memoir that consisted of these other stories of the people that I'm meeting along the way, in recovery, in rehab, and AA meetings and stuff like that, but also, my therapist and my sons and my ex-wife and my mom and my brother. And I start telling their stories, and you learn my story between the lines of theirs, and also learning something from each of these stories and helping to destigmatize addiction and alcoholism. And, because so many people have the wrong idea about what it is, that it's just a bunch of weak-minded, people with
why
no
can't
power.
You just stop?
Yeah. And wait a minute, why you love your kids so much? What, doesn't that make you stop? Or, you had this bad consequence. Well, wouldn't that make you stop? No, it makes it harder because now I feel bad and I'm just not like you. That's the thing, is you have to remind people, like, yeah, that makes regular people stop, but not people with this illness. We don't have an off switch. I need someone to help me turn it off once I turn it on. I do have the ability to decide when to turn it back on. So that's my goal in day-to-day life, is don't flip it back on, because once it's on, then I got to go back and have someone help me turn it off. And who knows when that will be.
Yep. So what's the name of your book, and where do people get it?
Yeah, the name of the book is Between the Lines, a memoir about addiction, empathy, and evolution. And
do you have a copy right there? Were you going to show it to me?
I do have a copy right here.
I knew you had it.
Of course I do. I have them all over the place.
And I'll pop a picture up on the video as well. But but thank you. Yes. Okay.
Yes. And I'm also doing a podcast of the same name called Between the Lines, the podcast, where, similar to yours, I'm interviewing someone each week and talking about their experience. Some of them are addicts and alcoholics, some aren't, but it's a positive platform. I want to give people hope. I thought I couldn't do it until I had a little sliver of hope, and I held on to that little bit of hope in order to get back. Now I'm happy and healthy, and productive again, and that is unbelievable to me. I was done. I thought I was done and my life was over, and I was never gonna be back. And 6 years later, after that point of no return, I'm sitting here like happy as can be. So I want to help give that to other people too.
I love that. I mean, that's what we do, and I love that. I love that you want to give back. Your book's on Amazon.
Yes.
Okay.
And the podcast is on Spotify and
it's Between the Lines.
Between the Lines, the podcast, and then the book is a memoir. Yeah.
Perfect. Jay, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Johnny.
If you had just one message to give to people listening, what would that message be?
That recovery is possible. That's for addicts and people who know them. Addicts in early recovery don't feel it's possible, and lots of loved ones of addicts think, oh my God, they're never going to get better. Rightly so, they feel that way, but it's possible. And listen to these stories of the people in recovery and their stories of experience, strength, and hope.
I think that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jay, for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our interview today. I think Jay's story is particularly impactful because as he said when he started, he didn't have childhood trauma. He didn't live with parents addicted. He had a great childhood and every opportunity, but he just wanted to party, and party he did. And then the loss of his father kind of sent him down the road of cocaine addiction, which is unfortunate, but he's clean and sober. He's happy. He's giving back. He's become a podcaster, which we're excited about. And he's written a book called Between the Lines, a memoir about addiction, empathy, and evolution. And it is on Amazon. If you just do Between the Lines and J. Lind, Lind, you can find it. And you can also find the podcast on Spotify. So everybody have a good week. If you need help, if you are addicted, please reach out and get that help. If you have a loved one who's addicted, now is the time to get them into treatment. You know, if you listen to this podcast all the way through, in the middle, we have an ad from a friend of ours, Bobby Newman. Bobby is an exceptional interventionist with an extremely high success rate. So if you're not comfortable getting your loved one into addiction, reach out to Bobby Newman. His information is in the middle of the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.